Right now I'm joined by, someone we haven't talked to for a couple of years. I think last time we talked was back at Farm Tech. It is Doug Lipp. Doug, how's it going?
Great, Sean. We're sitting here with some Disney music playing in the background. Maybe your clients can hear this right now. I don't know, but we're having fun.
Well, but it suits you.
Yeah. I would actually, they should play Inagata Davida, but that's okay.
Okay, I hear you. Okay, Doug. So, one of the things I love about your discussions is your focus on culture and how culture really does create that framework, that context for not only the business owner, the entrepreneur, but all of the employees to really, really live under.
Yeah, culture is the word that's bandied about these days. And really what I try to convey to my audiences, my clients, however I touch people is culture is really the amount of trust that you've engendered with your employees and with your clients. And absent trust, you cannot have anything move forward, regardless of the posters that you put up or the T-shirts that you wear that some people mistakenly think is culture.
Okay, but there's Fortune 500 companies with thousands of employees. I can understand how that would be important, culture, in that kind of context. But what about some of the people that are here? They're ag retailers, they're seed dealers. There might be just 2 employees, maybe 1 employee. Does it matter in that circumstance too?
Yeah, it matters. Culture happens regardless of you designing it or not. So whether you're a team of 2 or 20,000, culture happens. And the greatest organizations are those that recognize how they've built it and how they're going to perpetuate it. So what I like to say is that culture is in place, whether by design or by benign neglect. And for those organizations, whether large or small, that recognize their strengths and can maximize those, they're basically perpetuating their culture.
Okay, so in the workplace environment, who decides what a culture looks like, what it feels like? Is that up to the employees? Is that up to the owner? Or is that up to the customers?
Initially, it starts with leadership and ownership. Culture always starts at the top, but when the trust exists, like I mentioned earlier, then it reverberates from top to bottom, side to side, and then everybody has a hand in maintaining that culture. As an example, what I talk about with my career at Disney is everybody picked up garbage, whether you're a janitor or not, because when they saw Walt Disney walking across the park, he picked up garbage. So there's an example of culture starting at the top, but also living at the front lines.
And you mentioned your experience at Disney. Is Disney still the gold standard for culture?
There's a lot of different ways to look at that. Gold standard, meaning is it the only game in town? No. But I think that what Disney has shown is that by a laser focus on basic ideas, you can weather the storm of competition and global expansion. I was in Shanghai Disneyland just this last year, and the cast members over there are as ardent and as energetic as those when I was in the park in Disneyland in California, even though there's many generations and language differences between us.
Yeah, interesting. You mentioned everybody picks up garbage is a great example. I think a lot of business owners in agriculture and other industries struggle with where they jump to conclusions where maybe it's that janitor or maybe it's that person that is painting the fence, necessarily not the highest ranking person in the organization. They just don't get it. They don't get the culture. It's just a job. Your example at Disney is a good one because it doesn't have to be that way.
I look at 3 components when you say people don't get the job or they do get the job. And it boils down to hire right, train right, and treat right. You get the right people on board that buy into what you're doing, and then you prepare them to get the job done vis-a-vis training or coaching or mentoring, and it's a daily process, not just one and done. And then you put them into an environment that reflects what you talked about during the interview process and what you talk about during your training. So when you've got the right people on board, they're prepared, and they're sent into an environment that reflects that, then you get that culture that perpetuates itself.
Doug, you're from the U.S. You've been doing lots of speaking in Canada, traveling all around the world. What's the difference in business cultures do you see national differences as you travel from country to country in how they, not only the cultures that people have at those companies, but also how they view culture?
Almost definitely. There are regional differences. You get some groups that are exceedingly conservative and they're afraid of change and making a mistake, and that happens around the world. Some organizations that have had lots of government control are loath to take a risk and try something new because maybe their predecessors have had unfortunate circumstances when they made a mistake. So certainly there are regional and cultural differences that either drive creativity or suppress it.
Yeah. Interesting stuff, because I think culture is something that a lot of business owners, people working at companies, they talk about, but it's a different thing to actually live it and breathe it, where it becomes just a daily part of your life. And I think that's really what a lot of people aspire to, but they feel that it's out of their grasp, out of their reach sometimes.
I think the best leaders, Sean, are the ones that bring to life those words that are up on the boards that people put up, like integrity and creativity and trust. Nobody ever says, let's not have trust, let's not have creativity, let's not have integrity. That's ridiculous. But also, most of those words are fuzzy. Nobody knows, well, what does honesty and creativity and risk really look like? The leaders of the greatest organizations are the ones that will be an embodiment of that word. They will go out and take a risk. They might make a mistake, but they don't hide it, or they don't throw their employees under the bus. They say, look, we tried that, it didn't work, let's move on, and I own it. And that's what I want all of you to do, is to own what you're doing, so that you create not a bunch of wanton risk takers, but you create a cadre of people that are saying, we got to get out of our comfort zone, and I know that if I make a mistake, I'm not going to get in too much trouble for that.
Well, and I think, use the example, say, of the military. So there was, when the king rode at the front on his horse and they went into battle, yeah, he was living and breathing it. It was easy for him to show all the soldiers that I'm here with you too, at least visually. But how do you do that in an agricultural sense, or a small business sense? How do you really show the people that are working at your company that, hey, I'm right here with you? Is it just as easy as, hey, taking in the night shift once in a while?
Interesting. I mentioned that in the group with CCAN today, and it is getting into the field. And it's more than just getting into the field, it's what you do when you're in the field. So whether you are Walt Disney, who would walk the park and go into Disneyland at all hours of the day, he would ride rides, he would interact with employees back of the house at 3 a.m, or like a restaurateur who owns restaurants, goes out and touches tables and talks to guests, but also touches for the gum wads under the tables to see if the place really is clean. It's when you go into the field and you're talking to the farmers and you're talking to your clients, are you really listening, or are you just going through the motions? Because if you're just going through the motions, going into the field is going to do you no good at all.
Okay, so putting the Disney example to the side for a second, who do you view right now as a great leader?
Boy, that's a really interesting question and a hard one, because for major corporations, not one person stands out. I see a lot of great leaders in mom and pop organizations, because every day they are accountable for what they do. So I honestly cannot, at the top of my head right now, I cannot give you a name of a leader that currently I think, aside from, well, I'd say Bill Gates, in that he stepped away from Microsoft well before he needed to. And all too often I see leaders who ride that pony into the ground and they don't pull back, and Bill turned it over to other leaders when he was still a very young man. And he's doing a lot of great things for the world right now as a leader, as a visionary. But as far as Fortune 500 companies, I don't find that many great role models, honestly.
Okay, so that's interesting, because I was wondering if this is where your answer was going to go, because do you think at times we put some of those Fortune 500 leaders on this pedestal as they become mystical sort of, I was going to say mystical creatures, but you know what I mean by that frame of reference. And sometimes it's more of an appearance, and it's more of a brand than necessarily a culture that somebody would want to work in.
Exactly, and it's because of all the bright and shiny lights and objects that are in affiliation with them, and it's not really what they're doing. So I agree, and that's why I go back to those mom and pop organizations that I work with that really are pushing the envelope and creating cultures of inclusion and trust that people want to be there as opposed to, well, I just have to get a really good paycheck, or I've got stock options, therefore I'm staying here because I got to put my kids through college.
The unrecognized heroes of small business.
Exactly.
I absolutely love it. Hey, Doug, this has been great, but one last question. What's your favorite ride at Disney?
Pirates of the Caribbean.
Oh, my sister's like that too.
And you got to see the one in Shanghai or Hong Kong, I forget, I was just there, that is completely different than what's in the U.S.
What is it about that ride?
It's CGI based. It's a whole high-tech experience that has very few of the pirate characters, but it's otherworldly.
That's awesome. Hey, Doug, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Sean. Appreciate it.
That is Doug Lipp, keynote speaker, does a great job. I love talking to him. He's got some great stories of inspiration all about leadership and culture and things that make businesses really, really tick.